All right, my name is Caleb. I work in Chandler, Arizona for a fire and safety company, and I wanted to give you guys a quick rundown on how to recharge ABC fire extinguishers. I wanted to give a breakdown of every variety or manufacturer that we service here. I'm going to try not to go too in-depth because I want this to just be an introduction for newbies. So anyways, let's get started. Starting here with the Badgers, we've got a Badger Advantage and a regular Badger. The difference between these two is going to be the hoses. The Advantage, nice big shiny chrome looking one, as compared with the regular Badger hose. It's also going to have the nice big metal pickup tube as compared to the plastic one, and the valve stems are different. Again, the Badger Advantage is going to have the nice brass one there. It's a heavier duty one as compared with your basic little aluminum one in a traditional Badger. The heads are also different. This one's got a heck of a lot more weight to it than this one. It's also nice and shiny. If it's shiny, it goes with the Advantage. If it's dull aluminum, it goes with your regular Badger. To the springs, they are both the same spring. They are tapered. O-rings are also going to be the same, the 27s. The taper, the small side, goes over that. Do not mess that up. Do not put it on upside down. It will not work. Moving on to Amerexes. I have two here. One of them says B500. The other says B402. The heads are the same, valve stems are the same, O-rings the same, springs the same, pickup tubes the same. The difference is, again, the hoses. The 500 is going to go with your fluted hose. The 402 is going to go with your basic cylindrical hose. That is the only difference between the two. The hose regulates how fast these are going to discharge. All of these right here, your Badgers and your Amerexes, are going to use the number 23 adapter. Moving on to Kiddes. 3 different styles. One style looks like this. It's the regular size threads. These threads are the same size as your Amerex. Also going to use the same O-ring. Your other Kiddes and another style of Badger Advantage is going to look like this. Great big threads on it. You're going to use a different O-ring. It's this one that's got a lip on it. Kiddes, your yellow valve stems, springs, pretty basic, having a couple of different heights on them. Real quick on the Amerexes, these springs, they have a blue color to them. It's hard to see, especially as they get older. But anyways, blue spring, blue valve stem, that's Amerex. Coming over here to Buckeye. That's what the head looks like, Buckeye logo on the back. It is going to use this valve stem right here. It's kind of got a nut shape on it there versus your Badgers that are just nice and round. Cylindrical spring, pretty tall, pretty stiff. And getting into these ones here, you're going to use the 23 adapter. O-ring on it is 37. Moving on to Ansuls. I've got a new style, and I've got 2 old styles, and I've got a 3rd old style that I'm going to go over in a minute here. The new style, going to look like that. Nice big red head, pretty easy to spot. And the valve stem tapers in right here, as compared to the old style that's just a solid shaft. These are going to use a 4283/27 O-ring, and the spring is again tapered. The little tiny point fits over that piece right there. Again, do not flip these upside down. They will not work. Big problem with that, it sinks right down in there instead of sitting on top. Yes, oops, I have seen this multiple times, people putting these things in upside down. I don't know how they get them to take a charge like that and work, but you can't. It doesn't work. Anyways, moving on to the old style here. This is also an Ansul Sentry, even though it says Firemaster on it. This one says grinnell. I'll go over that in a minute. These are the old style heads. Threads on these two are the same, but these threads in here are actually different. This style is going to use the 35 adapter, and that's for this one. This style, along with the ones that I'm going to show you in just a minute, are going to use the 22. Both of these are going to use the same type of valve stem. We're going to use the same O-ring, which is a 195. One of these is going to be a fluted. The other is just going to be regular cylindrical. This only because this is a 2.5. Your 4.5 pound is going to look a little different. If you notice, I have 6 different labels on these. First Alert, a Buckeye, Firemaster, 2 style of Ansul Sentry labels, and a grinnell. They're all the same thing. They're all regular ABCs. As far as extinguishers that we do not service around here, we do not service First Alerts or Strike First. If there is first in the name, we don't do it. However, when this one here says First Alert, you can ignore it. It's an old style Ansul. Here are 3 Amerex fire extinguishers, but these are DOT cylinders. You have to treat them a little bit differently when you're doing a hydro. Paperwork. It sucks. All right, so right here we have one of the oldest ones. It's got this big thick metal band on it. Then we've got, these are from the mid 80s up to about 87, 88, somewhere around there. Then they switched over to this thin little band. And then they switched head styles to your modern Amerex. These ones are, I want to say late 90s to early 2000s. The main difference between those and these, it's going to be a quick difference, is the label. We got yellow and black versus white and yellow. If you see this old style head, it's automatically a DOT cylinder. What am I referring to with that? These ones are easier. Stamped into the bottom right here, it's going to say DOT 4B 195 111. And then it's going to be the year, the month and the year. So that one is 1185. And then the serial number, the G88059. All of that has to be recorded when you're doing a hydro on these things. Do not go by this serial number. They don't care about that at all. They only care about their serial number down here. Same thing with the year. Do not go by this one on the label. You go by this down there, 1185 versus 1986. Let's go over some examples of condemned ones, starting with a Badger that somebody put a sticker over and we were unable to remove it and peeled off the label. If you cannot read the instructions, it gets condemned around here. If you cannot read the serial number, that is an automatic condemned. They say that that everything but the serial number can be scraped off and it can still be a legitimate fire extinguisher. You can replace these labels. We don't really do that around here. An example of a very bad example is this one right here, where they scraped off the entire label and just put the instructions. That is a huge no-no. There is no serial number. I don't know what this thing is supposed to weigh. I do by memory, but let's just, for example, I don't know how much powder this thing is supposed to have in it. Another really bad example is putting a zip tie to hold your pins in place. Don't do this. You cannot remove these without scissors. Another reason for it getting condemned is dents. I don't know how well that one's going to show up on camera, but I've got 2 dents in this. If it is larger than a quarter, it gets condemned. Also, if you have scratches in the metal that are more than 10% deep, it gets condemned. If the rust, you got a lot of rust around the bottom here, that gets condemned. The rule of thumb is that if it is above that baseline right there, where the rust is coming up into the actual cylinder itself, that is when it gets condemned. Another example is this one right here. Everything about this looks fine. I mean, it's a little beat up, but the problem with it is the date, 9/84. Anything before 10/84 gets condemned. Another example of somewhat beat up label that the serial number is kind of scratched through. And this is where I talk bad about all the other companies. First off, I'm going to start with a Badger, date 2018. This is 2024. This one has never been serviced. Proper weight on this thing is 8 pounds, 14 ounces. My scale goes in tenths, so bear with me. 8.8, that one is perfect. Got one here, AFS. Weight on this one is supposed to be 8 pounds, 10 ounces. I'm at 7.8. Guys, I don't understand how people can get away with this. To me, that's a liability waiting to happen. All right, you've got people's property and lives on the line, and if they grab one of these fire extinguishers and try to put out a fire, there needs to be enough powder in there to do the job. All right, here we have one from Firehouse Solutions. The weight on this is supposed to be 6.5 to 7.1. The weight is good. What's the problem? Look at the gauge. This one was only supposed to be charged to 100 PSI. They way overcharged that one. Here we have Ryan Safety Services. This one is supposed to weigh 8 pounds, 13 ounces. 7 pounds, 7.8. Next one we have is Metro. This is supposed to weigh 9 pound 1 ounce to 9 pound 13 ounce. It's right on the bottom line of what's acceptable. I found one earlier today that was off by a lot more. I find these things at incorrect weights from every single company that I ever see stickers from. Nobody seems to be immune to it. Do better on your training, folks. If the extinguisher is not good enough that you would be embarrassed to have it hanging on your wall, then the customer is going to be embarrassed to have it hanging on their wall too. Make sure that these things look good by the time you send it back out to the customer. The only stickers that should be on here is your valid hydro sticker and, if applicable, your valid 6-year sticker. Nothing else. Get rid of all the other old labels. Get rid of this freaking illegible, powder-covered mess. What I'll go over with you guys is placement of your new hydro and 6-year stickers. Make sure to leave enough room for the next guy to put a sticker so that you don't end up doing this. All right, like these 3 right here, you've got plenty of space to put another sticker and the band would still go up there. But don't ever cover the stickers like these two. When to 6-year versus when to hydro. When a fire extinguisher is brand new, it's going to have the date stamped either on the bottom or it's going to be on the label. From that date, 6 years later, which this is a 2018 and we are in 2024, it will need to have a 6-year service. That is going to involve discharging it into your hopper, take the head off, clean the head, replace the O-ring. You're going to keep the valve stem, refill it with powder, and put it all back together. 6 years later, which right now that would mean 2030, it's going to need to be hydroed. That's going to involve discharging it, dumping out every last little bit of powder, throwing it on the hydro machine, hydro testing it to whatever is specified, rebuilding it, and you are going to replace the valve stem and the O-ring at that point. 6 years after that, it's going to need another 6-year service, and the cycle repeats. If you get a extinguisher that is 8 years old, say this was a 2016, that is going to get hydroed. The cutoff is going to be 2 years after it was due for a 6-year. So for our example right now, 2024, a 2017, I would still 6-year it. A 2016 is going to get hydroed. When you send these out into the field, the customer is expecting a fire extinguisher that's going to be good for approximately 6 years. You cannot send them out something that is only going to be good for 3. As far as where to find all of the dates, this one here is going to be on the label. This one here is on the label. These ones are on the label. And down here, a Buckeye is going to be stamped on the bottom. Kind of hard to see that. Same thing with Ansul. That one's very hard to see, but it says 2004 right there. Some of these are going to be on the bottom. 2012. 06. I'm going to go over an example of doing a 6-year service on a fire extinguisher. Now, I keep 2 sets of these adapters on my bench. One set I keep dirty for discharging. The other set I keep clean, and these ones I only use for recharging with the nitrogen when these things are fully rebuilt and done. That is the only time I use these. If I get one that has lost pressure and I just need to recharge it real quick so that I can discharge it, I'm just going to use my dirty adapters. Clean ones only used at the end. Personal preference is to use a little bit of steel wool. I just find that it gets them nice and clean. Then you're going to blow it out. I'm not going to do that on video. Clean your old valve stem. Grab a new O-ring. Oops. We can use that, whatever. White lithium grease. This is what we use on the valve stems and the O-rings. Little dab on your finger. Doesn't take much. Both O-rings. In fact, on here, put a little bit up on the top of the shaft. It helps it function better when you're squeezing the handle. Sometimes dirt and stuff can fall in there, gum it up, and it'll be so hard to squeeze this handle that you'll end up putting a dent right up here because this thing is not wanting to get out. When this is upside down, that's going in upside down. Taper faces the valve stem. All right, we've done an initial fill on this one. Total weight is supposed to be 5 pounds, 2 ounces to 5 pound, 10 ounces. See where we're at right now. 5.4. We lucked out, guys. Quite often, the initial fill is not going to fill it. Do an initial fill, let it rest for a minute, and fill it up again. There are a few exceptions to that rule. One of them being these little Ansuls. Same with the little 2.5 pound Buckeyes. Almost everything else, you are going to have to do a second fill. The first fill is not going to get it enough. And that is the biggest problem that I see with too many other people, including those examples that I just showed you before, that the weights were too low. It's because they did an initial fill and called it a day. Very high tech around here with toothbrushes. All right, it is recharged. It is in the green. We are not done yet. Lay it somewhere, add some soapy water. Let it rest for a little bit. What you're watching for is bubbles. If you get no bubbles after about a minute or so, then it's good to go. If you've got a little ring of bubbles around there, your valve stem is leaking, you need to redo it. And that is an example of one that has failed. Any day that you're going to be hydroing, first thing you have to do is hook up your test cylinder to verify that your gauge is accurate. So right now, both of them are saying 0.2. I'll clear that one out. Put this in here. Right now I've got an adapter on, so I'm not going to demonstrate that. Charge it up to whatever test PSI you're going to be using throughout the day. And then on the back of this sheet is instructions on how to verify that your gauge is within an accurate reading. This is your hydrostatic retest data sheet. Once you have your cylinder emptied, clean it out of every last little bit of powder. This thing needs to be perfectly clean. Then you're gonna fill it up with water from the hose. Goes way fast. If you try to just let it fill up with this little tiny hose, it's gonna take you forever, especially if you're trying to hydro 10s and 20-pound fire extinguishers. Right now we're making sure that all air bubbles have left the cylinder through our discharge line. This is our inlet. Our discharge is going into our tub. Once we are certain that all air bubbles are out, close the discharge line. Come up there to your big red button. We're pressurizing it up a little past 585, as close as you can keep it to 585, because this is a Amerex. Most of your fire extinguishers are going to get pressurized to about 585 PSI. Some of your Kiddes, you're only going to pressurize to 300. Ansuls are generally going to be 600 PSI. So because there's so many fittings in this system, it's going to bleed down a little bit, at least on mine. So I just know that so long as it's bleeding down very, very slowly, it's holding pressure. After we've confirmed that for 30 seconds, you can go ahead, open everything up. Get that. Let it drain for a minute, and then you're going to throw it on your dryer. After it's done with the dryer, take a little light, shine it in there, make sure everything is completely bone dry. You're also going to be checking for any major rust in there too.